Hey guys, good afternoon. Sorry for the delay. I just had to wait for Moza and JD to finish up their stream. So we'll just get going. Lots and lots of stuff to discuss, so it should be an interesting one. We certainly have a lot of content, a lot of movements in the last few days, a lot of stuff we discussed as well on Thursday in our stream. So let's cover everything. Let me just share my screen real quick. I have an AC close to my head, so if that's annoying, let me just let me know and I'll turn it off. Yeah, markets pumped a lot, and a lot of diffs have been forming in the last few hours. If I'm completely honest, I mean higher time frame, nothing super relevant yet, and with that I mean 12-hour and above, so daily, 3 days certainly not. A daily a bit high, but that does not necessarily mean much for Bitcoin. Obviously, the more it goes into an overbought area on the daily, the less lucrative returns become, right? Like you cannot expect the daily to be at 77 and for Bitcoin to go from 120K to 180 in a few days, right? At least you would expect some form of retracement in the RSI. But in my view, there's still no big signs of weakness in BTC. There was an attempt to print an 8-hour and 4-hour divergence last night that failed. So still no big signs yet. Maybe there's something on more lower time frames. Yeah, we got a 30-minute div earlier in the context of a daily overbought area, but this is more relevant for lower time frames, right? Intraday, maybe for the first days of the week. Higher time frame, just as I said last week, the move on Bitcoin reminds me a lot on of the move in we had in November, precisely here, right? So the daily RSI was also at 77. But the price did not stop from moving for a few more weeks. And this is, to be honest, something I expect in the next few days and weeks as well, until some form of a more higher time frame divergence forms on Bitcoin. And only in that case, we can speculate about a local top being in. In November, for instance, we did have a 3 drive on the 12-hour, which was a very big signal that Bitcoin is close to a top. Now we don't have that yet. Yes, everything overbought, but as I said, it can stay overbought until some divergences form. So I wouldn't be surprised if we maybe see something like this in very, very beautiful drawing, but you get the point. So some price action similar to this, right? Because Bitcoin never really tops on a Burj Khalifa wick, something like this. It's always higher time frame consolidation, grinding up higher. As the price moves higher, RSI starts dropping, and that basically tells you that Bitcoin is losing momentum, just as we have seen here with the RSI dropping. But we have also seen it last cycle as well, when Bitcoin topped right here. So there was like 19th of October, almost 2 months consolidating. This was the last time it printed a regular bullish divergence, bearish divergence on the monthly. So expecting something very similar, to be honest. I would be surprised if it just tops out here this way and then just starts doing this. I don't see that as possible. Of course, lower time frame dips are always possible. I still think that the 111K area is the best area for swing plays, as the invalidation is very easy. There can be scalp levels, certainly, but this would be an ideal zone for buying if we get it. And now, I don't know, we're certainly in a stage within the market where greed is absolutely skyrocketing, right? And what that means is basically that every shallow dip will be bought up, either on spot and mostly on leverage. We will see open interest grinding up. We will see greed grinding up higher, right? and funding as well. Funding and open interest a bit elevated, but nothing too crazy yet to be indicative of the top being in for Bitcoin. So I'm hesitant to be calling that. In fact, there's no point in trying to do that, at least until we see a daily or a bearish divergence, or let's say a 12-hour 3 drive or something like that. Good news is that we don't really have to make any predictions, right? There's no point of us saying, well, Bitcoin is at 120K and it will go until 145K, right? What's the point in doing that? Because we constantly evaluate local triggers, right? So if there's no divergence playing out here, apart from the monthly ones, which where we will get to in a second, there's no point to be speculating that this move is done on more higher time frames, right? And then at some point, if we get something like this, as I said, let's say on the daily, something like this, and you get a daily bearish divergence, then yes, this is not something you want to ignore, because you know that apart from this, you also have a weekly 3 drive, a 2 weekly, and a monthly 3 drive, right? And let's cover that as well. So whenever you see these local triggers, you basically start taking profits, right? Because there's, in my view, no point to try and predict any level on Bitcoin, because it is in price discovery and there's not a lot of data that you can work with. If the previous all-time high on Bitcoin would have been somewhere around 140, 150, and you would have the data, and you could more easily say, yes, we can potentially test the previous all-time high area, but now you're in price discovery, so you will always evaluate local triggers to try and make predictions. On more higher time frames, very, very clear in my view. We have talked about the monthly bearish divergence last month, right? Now I've got questions whether that got invalidated. I think it got even worse, if you ask me, right? We did have a regular bearish divergence on the monthly. Now we could basically print a 3 drive, right? So that's even worse. So it will depend, of course, on how this month will close. So it's July 14th now, and very, very early to tell. But if this month, let's say, closes like this, right? Then we have a perfect 3 drive, but we cannot we can not yet say that this is a 3 drive, because we have to wait for the monthly close. Because let's say the monthly closes here, I'm just giving an example, right? Or here, then that's not a 3 drive. So we cannot no longer use that pattern to assume that the top for Bitcoin is in. So we will see how this closes this month and next month, and then we can jump into conclusions. Very, very similar price action on the 2 week, right? Pretty clear 3 drive forming as well. Needs a bit more. Potentially a pop towards 130. Can wick above that as well, right? What will matter at the end is how the 2 week closes, and the weekly as well. The weekly as well, perfect 3 drive. I'm personally not somebody who's just gonna ignore a 3 drive. It's not confirmed yet. We don't have a 3 drive on the monthly, 2 week, and 1 week yet. But this is something we will monitor, right? Because if these form, then I could see us actually topping out at around 130, 140K, maybe with a wick towards 150, and then come back down and print the divergence. But whenever that happens and we have the confirmation, we know that it's time to start taking bigger profits on Bitcoin as well, and other stuff as well, right? But as I said, on more lower time frames, I don't see, and with lower time frame now, I mean 12-hour daily and 3-day, I don't see big divergences forming yet. This is not a 3-day, this is too wide for the 3-day. So I would need to see something here we don't have that yet. So we will be looking for that. So I think it's pretty clear, right? What we're looking for in the next few weeks. No need for me to try and be a hero and to try to time the perfect top for Bitcoin. It's very difficult because it's in price discovery, but we will always make decisions based on local triggers. Like here, for example, when Bitcoin basically dropped to 75K, we didn't need to predict the bottom of Bitcoin when we were here, right? Because if we tried to predict that, we would probably have said it's going to 73K, right? Previous all-time high area. No, what we did instead, when Bitcoin dropped maybe to this level, is that we could have said we can speculate on a daily bullish divergence to form, right? But that was like maybe 2 weeks before it did. And then when we got this dip on April 7th, we could have said, oh nice, we got a daily dip, right? So time for me to buy some Bitcoin because it's also at an oversold area, right? So we didn't need this prediction beforehand. We just should have evaluated local triggers, and when we saw the bullish divergence, then we could have bought. And this is what I'm trying to point out for here, right? We don't need to make any predictions. We will see something like this, right? Well, that's a good idea. We will see something like this. Very easy. Here we go. Doesn't have to be the daily. Right? You get the point. When that happens, we will talk about it, and then we can decide if it's time to take some profits or not. Hey, Tupi, nice speed drive. Yeah, man. It's a three drive that can lead to a dive, if I may say so. I was sure you're gonna get us back on our feet. No, I'm not saying we're top, right? Because it's Orphex here. Orphex was telling me that I was being bearish. No, I've never been more bullish in the last few weeks and months. You know that, right? I've been saying for at least 10 days that we don't have signs of weakness yet. So there's no reason to assume, for me at least, that at least Bitcoin is locally topped, right? So I'm saying I'm expecting something like this in the next few days, weeks, maybe even going into Q3, September, October, and then I'll really get you back to the ground. You bear you. Yeah, so this is basically it. That does not mean though that altcoins are necessarily not topped, right? Because altcoins always top before Bitcoin. Remember that. That's very important. So we will get to altcoin in indexes as well and discuss that. The dollar, I think we smashed it. No, we got well. It doesn't look like a bottom on the weekly, but certainly a nice bounce from macro range lows. As I said, the first tab, I don't expect this to top out Bitcoin. If you get a second tap, something like this, then it becomes more likely because in this stage, I would expect Bitcoin to be a bit higher than it is today. And when Bitcoin is, let's say, at 140, 130, printing a perfect 2-week free drive, and the dollar is still cheap, what do you do as a long-term investor, right? You take your money from an asset that has done more than a 10x in 3 years, and you park it in a very safe currency that's still cheap, right? So this is still working out. S&P 500 also printing a monthly bearish divergence. Monthly, keyword in monthly, this takes a lot of time, right? It's not something that just tops out the S&P 500 right now. But if we look at the dollar, if you look at the way Bitcoin could shape up that 3 drive, and if you look at this monthly for the S&P 500, then we have 3 key catalysts suggesting that yes, maybe by the end of this year, beginning of next year, we could actually see Bitcoin topping out, right? We do have the material to work with. And is this a prediction? Again, not. It's just an analysis that tells me this is something worth monitoring in the next few weeks and months, and that will educate our decision making in the near future and in the midterm, right? But I honestly believe that the dollar is bottomed. There are a few reasons why I do believe that, apart from a technical standpoint, right? Macro range lows, of course. Short positions on the dollar has dropped to the lowest level since 2021. So hedge funds and professional asset managers are not as heavily shorting the dollar as they have been doing in the last 2 weeks and months. Apart from that, I think the big beautiful bill that was signed by Trump recently was a big factor that led to a decline of the dollar. And maybe you have noticed, once that got signed and approved by the Senate, that's when the dollar started rising, right? So a lot of pricing in the big beautiful bill, and once it got signed, sell the news event and the dollar starts pumping again. More lower time frames, this is something I was looking at earlier today. So we'll be seeing what it does soonish. Does it look any better on other time frames? The good news is that even if you're sidelined, guys, your net worth is increasing because the dollar is gaining a bit of momentum. I mean, gaining a bit of momentum. It's still in a downtrend, right? But it has increased a bit in the last few days. What's the chat saying? Nothing better than sitting on the toilet watching your stream. I'll take that as a compliment, I guess. Bet. I don't know what you're doing in the toilet hearing my voice, though. Just going through the chat. Just guys, if you have questions, just tag me, right? Because then I can more easily differentiate between the question and just regular chat. So if you got a question, just tag me. But yeah, I mean, Bitcoin is not really showing many signs of weakness, but altcoins I think are quite a lot divergences forming in the last few hours. If you look at the 12-hour for ETH, for example, it's a pretty clean div on the 12-hour. And naturally, when you see a confirmed more higher time frame divergence, you don't long into this, right? This is usually a sign where you take profits. I really do think that if this divergence plays out, we will have a retest of this area here, 2,800, 2,780. I think that would be a really nice zone to buy some spot, because ETH did reclaim a pretty big area here, and your invalidation is pretty much maybe below 2,700, fighting acceptance below into this range. And the upside potential from here is pretty massive. I mean, a few targets, 3,300 and potentially 3,600 and 4,000. And then the usual discussion we have at a resistance area, right? Wait for the reclaim, and then maybe we get 4,500, but step by step, basically. Other alts also printing some bearish divergences. I noticed a bit earlier, like Solana, for example. Looking at the 12-hour, very clean. Very clean. And when you see something like this, you don't long this, you take profits, because the probability of this actually playing out and giving you a nice dip is actually higher than this getting invalidated. Right, and you don't want to take that risk of longing here and speculating on an invalidation of the div. That's not the bet you make as a trader. Last time we got a 12-hour div on Sol. It retraced by 30%. I don't think that's gonna happen now. 30% retrace on Solana or on altcoins because of the way that indexes look, but it's still something that you don't want to ignore. What you can do though is looking at more lower time frame divergences for buying or for longing. Like for Sol, for instance, I think we did have a bull div, and for many other coins over the weekend as well. 30-minute right here. Right, so this is something. Oh, there we go again. This is something you can monitor on lower time frames if you're looking for entries, and you'll get this again. I mean, look at Sol. 30-minute RSI at 42, you'll get this oversold here. And then if you get a bullish divergence of the 30-minute, you can try and buy some spot or long, because the invalidation is basically very, very easy in that case. Of course, it's always good to keep an eye on BTC, but it's also approaching the 30-minute oversold area, which is nice because we didn't get that since July 7th, basically, in more than a week. Right, so here for BTC, I will be looking for a 30-minute div, or something like this, maybe this in this area here. And when you get this, you can try along, and that's on more lower time frames. And yes, it is 30-minute, but maybe you can swing it, right? You never know. There have been a few 30-minute bullish divergences in the last 2 weeks that ended up as swings. Look at this, for example. 30-minute divergence on July 5th. You know what I mean? Almost 20K move here as well. Hope that's clear. Oh, the questions are coming. What do you think about altcoins? I'll get there in a second. Pat, I see that, man. That's strange. If the 12-hour div on ETH plays out, do you think of Singlons and all such as Pepe on that drop? Kind of what I was thinking. Pepe has been a bit weak, man. I don't know. It's not been super strong. I mean, in relative terms. If you get Pepe to this area here, 11.11, and ETH in my zones, yeah, I could pick up some spot. But I think they're better movers, like Aave, for example. In my view, it's a better ETH beta, 56% pump since the end of June. So we'll look at something like Aave, maybe Anna. Did we break through others' zone? We rejected, right? Yeah, I'll get there in a second. Questions about the 12 on div. Why do we look for 30-minute versus looking? Yeah, I mean, market is a bit bullish, right? Especially after a more significant move. You always have to wait a bit until you get the bigger drops, right? Because as I said, a lot of new participants in the market, they see a small drop, they try and long, right? And that's a bit annoying if you're sidelined, of course, because it may take some time until you get a more higher time frame RSI reset. But if you don't want to wait that long, then you just look at something like the 30-minute, and that's more realistic to get. I'll check others in a bit. Don't worry. Swiggy, welcome to Wealth Group, first of all. I'm glad to have you here. Thank you for a question. I do suggest one thing. Tomorrow I have a Q&A about my trading strategy at 4 p.m. Central European Time, 3 p.m. UK time, and 10 a.m. Eastern. So I suggest you join that one, and then you can ask me questions about my strategy, right? Because if I go on and explain my strategy here, this is a macro stream, and it may take some time away from other members. So just join my strategy stream tomorrow, and you can ask as many questions as you want regarding my trading style. Hope that's fine. All right, let's get to some indexes. Some interesting ones to me. Total market cap. What can we say here? Trying to break out. I'm not sure if it holds this zone, to be honest. I would be more inclined towards this area here. Maybe a bit higher. If you get this on total market cap, you buy and you don't ask questions. You buy spot and you don't ask questions. 3.5 trillion. But also here, I mean, the daily at an overbought zone 75, right? So you won't get the same returns as buying here. You know what I mean? Others for altcoins running straight into our resistance area, right? Of course, altcoin sentiment is very positive as we run into a resistance area. But what's the golden rule? You don't get bullish at the resistance area. Running into resistance and printing an 8-hour bearish divergence. Yeah, it's a bit strange of a divergence, a bit wide, but still a divergence. Right here. Right, so here I'm very cautious on altcoins. I mean I do think that Bitcoin goes higher, but I don't want to be buying altcoins under resistance. Right, so nice rejection here already, dropped by 10 billion in market cap. Areas of interest, I still do think 250 billion would be like the buy and don't look back area. Right, you don't tag me about whether you should buy here or not. You just buy spot, of course. Place some alerts at 268, maybe a bit too aggressive, but just place some alerts here. And if you get 30-minute divergences at 268, you can try some long setups or even buy spot, especially if you have a bullish divergence on Bitcoin. Then I think 268 could work out, and the invalidation would be very easy, which is basically acceptance below 260 billion. Or if you just want to accumulate, you say, I accumulate here and I add here. And then you can potentially hold everything up for this reclaim of this area. Or say others tells me, DB, hold my beer. And I'll just reclaim the zone above 300 billion, right? And gives no pullbacks at all. Then what I would be doing is the following. So if you look at total 2, and if you look at on it on more higher time frames, we had a very similar setup, breaking from the trend line, reclaiming a very big area of resistance, right? We talked about this, which was tapped 7-8 times, right? And then it just basically broke out. And look at this. When we got those 30-minute divergences over the weekend, we did have a retest of this area, right? And this should be holding as support now. What you don't want to see here, basically acceptance back below. So for others, I would do the same. If you don't get that pullback, I do think you will, because of the divergences forming in the market. But if you don't, and let's say Bitcoin is so strong and dominance just drops so much that the others just reclaim the zone, you wait for this breakout, then you wait for a small pullback around this area here. And the moment you get these 30-minute divergences, you basically buy. right? Because the invalidation is very, very easy. Flip above the zone and the true fun and alts starts, in my view. So if you're sidelined and if you didn't catch this move here, that's fine, because once, or if this is then reclaimed, I think we can at least target 390 billion, which is another 30% move, and potentially cycle highs reached in December last year, which is another 45% move, right? So as I said, it's very important to not feel FOMO, and especially to not take actions based on FOMO, but to wait for the right setup for buying, because it will come. And just as in any uptrend in the market, like here or like here, well, this was wild, but here, for example, it will appear like there will not be any retrace in the market. And if you're longer in the game, that's absolutely not true, right? Because people will take profits and the charts will retrace and will give you a proper a pullback. So I think this is very clear. You either wait for this reclaim or this for swings, this for scalps. But the triggers associated with this 30-minute divergence. That's very important. What's the chat saying? Yes, Swiggy. Looking forward to see you, man. Dijan, thanks for sharing the strategy workshop. If you have questions about this, just join my workshop tomorrow, my Q&A. Trump threatens 100% secondary sanctions on Russia. Yeah, great. Just accelerated divergences is what I would say. What else? USDT dominance. I think we did a pretty good job on this. You got a few buy zones, especially this one. Bullish divergence on the daily, full daily RSI reset. Then we got a 30-minute bearish divergence, but this daily RSI reset, 30-minute divergence on Bitcoin at 98K here as well, which were the local triggers for buying. Now we've broken down for the diagonal trend line, yet no big signs of strength. 8-hour, 4-hour, no div, 4-hour. Oh, okay. A bit wide, but still a divergence. Okay, this is interesting, actually. I just saw this for the first time. But okay, it comes in line with others basically rejecting from our resistance area too, right? So this will, well, we did see the divergences on Sol and ETH as well, right? And many other altcoins. But this is interesting. This is actually very interesting. So we'll see how this plays out. But my swing level is 450. 450 is my really big swing level. You can put some alerts on 435. That would be very aggressive. Again, here, if you see, if you see some form of 30-minute bearish divergence forming at 4.35, you can try some longs, right? Especially if you get that divergence on Bitcoin. This is why local triggers are important, right? Especially if you're new to this stream. It's not about predicting, right? Because we can identify a few zones of interest, right? But what's the point of me saying 4.35 is a good buy zone, and then it gets there and we don't have any local triggers? Then my prediction is wrong, right? No, what we do is we identify a few zones, let's say 2, 3 if possible. In this case, 4.35 to 4.38 and 4.50, and we say, when we get to these zones, we will be looking for triggers, and if we have lower time frame triggers, and I personally use divergences, other traders can use other things, right? And if you get that local trigger, then yes, our prediction was kind of correct, or we can assume that it will be correct, right? And we can try some stuff here. If there's no local trigger, then there's no point of saying, well, I planned this initially, so I'm going to buy here. No. It's about making a plan and then evaluating local triggers before taking action. But these are my two zones of interest, especially 4.50. I do think that on more higher time frames, there are no divergences yet that would tell me that this is the bottom for USDT dominance. We discussed it last week that every time USDT dominance, where's my RSI? Every time USDT dominance, great colors. Every time USDT dominance basically reversed on a macro level, it did form a more higher time frame divergence, right? Here, 3 drive on the daily, people excited, people even more excited. But the TA was telling that this move is basically losing momentum. So the growth in the market is losing momentum. Then here, nice breakdown from this diagonal trend line. Again, daily divergence, which topped the market in May. And then we got the full daily RSI reset down to 98K for Bitcoin, but certainly more for altcoins, right? Altcoins dropped like 40, 50, 60% on this uptrend for USDT dominance. So what I do expect is another bull div to form, well, a bit higher on the second P. Another bull div to form on the daily, or at least the 12-hour, maybe a 12-hour 3 drive, and then I would be saying something like, we are very close to a top in the market. And in the beginning of the stream, I said, I do expect that on the other hand, or the other side for Bitcoin, right? Where I do expect on higher time frames the price to rise while the other side to come down. And I basically look for the same setup in USDT dominance to try and understand or time the local top for the market. I don't see that yet. Maybe on lower time frames, yes, but USDT dominance doesn't bottom on a 4-hour bullish divergence, at least not macro bottom, right? Maybe a local bottom that can lead to a nice retrace in the market, but not like macro bottom. Do you ever watch 3 minutes and 15 minutes? I do watch 15 minutes sometimes, but 3 minute not. I'm a more of a higher time frame trader. This is more of a macro stream. So I do discuss these indexes mostly on the daily time frame. Right? It's not necessarily relevant for intraday trading. But sometimes, 15 minutes sometimes, especially if it's in a context of Bitcoin being oversold on the 4-hour or 8-hour or 12-hour. And if you don't know what oversold or overbought means, because we have some newer members today, basically I buy assets when they're oversold. So when the RSI is sub 30, I look for TPs when the RSI is overbought. Well, not for USDT dominance, but for other assets, because this has an inverse correlation with the market, right? But you get the point. Like for Bitcoin, for example, I start taking profits when I see signs of weakness at overbought, and I start buying when it's at oversold, so sub 30 and above 70. But as I said, just because something is at oversold doesn't mean it will necessarily bottom instantly, right? We still need this divergence. So price and RSI moving in different directions, basically. What time frames do you look at RSI on usually? I look at so 15 very rarely. I start from 30. I go to 1 hour and a 4-hour, 8-hour, 12, and daily. And then sometimes if the market has moves more, I can go to 3-day and weekly, but that's more for like super higher time frame trading. Like if you want to buy Bitcoin for a 3-year hold, you look at the weekly RSI, if you know what I mean. Or if you want to sell Bitcoin after a 3 years hold, you want to look at the weekly or the 2-week or the 1 month. But this is not important for like intraday or intra-week trading. Thoughts on CPI tomorrow? Inflation is expected a bit higher than last month by 0.2%, but we did anticipate that, right? We were always bullish on inflation, if I can say that, because I thought that inflation dropped earlier this year a bit unnaturally. It was more of a momental play from fear from tariffs. It wasn't like a sustainable drop in inflation, so it's naturally coming back now as certainty is coming back to the markets. You have seen basically no reaction from the markets on new tariffs, right? So that just tells you that people don't care more about it, and the certainty has come back, and you can see that in the fear and greed index as well, right? So naturally, inflation starts rising a bit. Oh, market dropping. You're not telling me, guys. So CPI shouldn't be super important tomorrow. Market expects inflation to be higher. If numbers are missed by a lot and they come in higher than expected, maybe that can accelerate these divergences that we discussed. But we already know from the divergence that the market is up for a drop, right? So CPI does not really change a lot on that. It could change the approach of the Federal Reserve regarding rate cuts in September, right? Because Paul has said that if numbers coming good during the summer, then we can consider rate cuts sometime in September. If inflation is indeed high, then that might not be the case. So I think that's how it's relevant, but I would focus more on TA, to be honest. Okay, so we're dropping a bit. Divergence is playing out on Ethereum as well. Was very clean, as we mentioned a bit earlier. 12-hour, you don't ignore a 12-hour. You can ignore a 1 hour, 2 hour, which can easily get invalidated. But a 12-hour is something you don't ignore. And I want this to be a bit reset. And with the bit reset is I want at least a 30-minute div on this before taking any longs. But I'm honestly, I'm like super interested in this area, 2,800 to 2,790. So we'll see. But we will always evaluate local triggers, as I said. All right, what else do we got? Let's see. I think we covered all indexes, right? Others also rejecting now quite heavily from our resistance zone. So really good red on this one. We said that if 250 is reclaimed, the 290 billion area is our big zone, so 300 billion to 290 billion. No new entries below this resistance zone. Ignore all the FOMO in the market. Just ignore it and play your levels, because what will happen is as the market goes higher, people will just adjust their targets. You know what I mean? If their target was 2,800 on ETH, when 2,800 comes, they will say my target is 3,000. When 3,000 comes, they will say my target is 3,400. You know, but naturally the price just doesn't go up all the time. So you will need to stick to a certain level that you respect, and you play that. Others, BTC is also at a very interesting zone. You remember the daily bull diff we discussed last month? Played out pretty nicely. Now coming into a resistance zone, right? And what we've also said about others, BTC, is that this is still in a downtrend. And we won't get a proper all season without this changing trend. Will this happen in the future? I think it's absolutely possible. But we will wait for confirmation, right? Because now it's under resistance, and let's see if it's forming any divergences on this resistance area. 12-hour not, 8-hour. Oh, there we go. There we go. 8-hour bear div. And when you get an 8-hour bear div on others dominance, it basically tells you that. So others is the index that accumulates the market cap of the top 125 coins, and this index basically represents the altcoin sector, right? And investors use it to trade mid caps. And others dominance is basically, or others BTC is basically the strength of mid caps relative to Bitcoin in this case. And you can use this to trade and understand when strength is coming in to altcoins and when it is moving out of altcoins. And usually when it is at resistance, you know that altcoins will lose some strength against BTC, while when it is at support or forming bullish divergences, it is usually at a point where it can reverse and altcoins can take strength away from Bitcoin. So now at resistance, just like the others index, this is a very good area to be taking some profits from purchases that were made earlier, right? Especially given this resistance zone. And then wait for your next move, guys. You don't have to be in a position every day, especially after such a massive move, right? Others up 24% in a few days. Why risk giving away these profits and just instantly look for an entry? Let price action develop and see what it does, right? We have reason to believe that we can see a pullback from the zone. So especially on higher time frames, it takes a little bit more time, right? Before that pullback actually comes. So I mean, you can be aggressive and try to sculpt the market a bit, of course, if you have the right lower time frame triggers. But this is a macro stream, so you can assume that everything I discuss is on more higher time frames. This dip on alts will probably be a shallow as Saturday, right? Or will it be deeper because of 12? No, I think I think it can be a bit deeper because now we did reach some macro resistance areas for others, and we have some more higher time frame divergences, like on others on the 8-hour, Ethereum on the 12-hour, right? We didn't have that on Saturday yet. Remember last week, especially on the market overview that I shared on Friday, I did say I don't see signs of weakness yet in the market. And then over the weekend and today, we did form these signs of weakness. So if these divergences play out, then I do think that we can see a deeper pullback in the next few days and weeks. Not higher time frame bearish yet, right? And just saying that it is possible that we get a deeper pullback. I do think that Bitcoin dominance is not bottomed yet. So I do think that alts have some juice in the tank, especially if Bitcoin reaches to new highs in the near to midterm. Remember, we did get a 12-hour bear diff on BTC dominance, daily bear diff on BTC dominance, and especially the daily has not been reset yet. So I think this can drop a bit lower in the next few weeks. Of course, on lower time frames, you can always have divergences like here, for example, that did lead to some weakness in altcoins on Friday. Right, but on more higher time frames, I do think that we will not reach new highs for Bitcoin dominance just yet, at least until we reset some of these more higher time frame divergences. So what this means basically is that in a pullback across the market, I'm still more interested in altcoins than I am on Bitcoin, because I do think that the returns or the potential returns on the secondary market that from this point on are better than the returns from Bitcoin. All right, almost time. So I think we covered everything relevant. Pretty much not a lot changed, right? We still have the same levels we have been discussing, as we mostly view those on more higher time frames. Yeah, also pretty being pretty strong, I would say, because of the drop on Bitcoin dominance. So the moment you get a 30-minute div on Bitcoin, you can try some alts, in my view, or you can try long in Bitcoin. So set your alerts on BTC on the 30-minute. All right, guys. So, long story short, Bitcoin, no signs of weakness yet. I do think we can go higher in the next few days and weeks. Altcoins under resistance, as I said, reached a pretty big area. 290 billion is the zone to be reclaimed. No reclaim, alts are topped. Reclaim, then you can bid a retest and potentially target higher levels in the next few weeks and months. But there are a few bearish divergences, right, that you should consider. So watch them reset, at least on more lower time frames, before taking any action. That's very important. All right, guys. Thank you for joining. We had 60 people at the peak, and that's really nice to see. Market heating up. So let's remain locked in. Let me know under fundamentals, especially if you're new to this group. I'm quite active under the fundamentals channel, where you can ask me questions about basically anything. If you don't understand anything, or if you want me to look at anything, just let me know. And thank you guys for joining. I appreciate it. Don't forget to join my Q&A tomorrow, 4 p.m. Central European Time, 10 a.m. Eastern. You can ask me anything about my strategy. So until then, take care, guys. Stay safe trading and have a nice rest of the day. Cheers.